I never thought I'd find love at the bottom of a sand trap, but life has a way of throwing you curveballs when you least expect it. There I was, Lauren Torres, newly minted executive at Wright Industries, staring down at my golf ball nestled in the soft white sand like it was mocking me. The St. Paul's sun beat down on my neck, and I could feel beads of sweat trickling down my back. This promotion was supposed to be my crowning achievement, but instead, it felt like a noose tightening around my neck. "Need a hand?" a voice called out, startling me from my thoughts. I turned to see a blonde goddess standing at the edge of the bunker, her blue eyes twinkling with amusement. She was lean and tanned, her golf attire hugging curves in all the right places. "I've got it," I grumbled, not in the mood for some country club princess to witness my humiliation, but as I took my stance and prepared to swing, she spoke again. "You might want to open the club face a bit more," she suggested, "and keep your wrists firm through impact." I paused, irritation warring with curiosity. "You sound like you know what you're talking about." She grinned, flashing perfect white teeth. "I should hope so. I practically grew up on this course." Against my better judgment, I adjusted my grip and stance as she'd suggested. To my surprise, the ball popped out cleanly, landing softly on the green. I couldn't help but smile. "Not bad," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Natalie." "Lauren," I replied, suddenly very aware of how warm and soft her skin felt against mine. "Thanks for the tip." "Any time," Natalie winked. "Say, you look like you could use a playing partner. Care for a friendly match?" I hesitated, knowing I should get back to the office and tackle the mountain of work waiting for me. But something in those piercing blue eyes made me throw caution to the wind. "You're on." What followed was the most enjoyable round of golf I'd had in years. Natalie was good. Damn good, but so was I. We were evenly matched, trading birdies and friendly barbs as the afternoon wore on. By the time we reached the 18th hole, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Last hole," Natalie said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Care to make it interesting?" I raised an eyebrow. "What did you have in mind?" She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something light and floral. "Loser buys drinks at the clubhouse?" My heart skipped a beat. Was she flirting with me? I pushed the thought aside, chalking it up to wishful thinking. "Deal," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We both hit solid drives down the center of the fairway. Our approach shots were nearly identical, leaving us with tricky downhill putts for birdie. Natalie went first, her ball curling tantalizingly close to the hole before lipping out. "Gosh darn it," she muttered, giving me an opening. I lined up my putt, taking a deep breath to calm my suddenly racing pulse. As I drew back my putter, I felt Natalie's eyes on me, intense and unwavering. I stroked the ball, watching as it rolled true, disappearing into the cup with a satisfying rattle. "Yes," I pumped my fist, turning to see Natalie's reaction. She was smiling, but there was something else in her expression. Admiration? Attraction? "Well played," she said softly. "Looks like drinks are on me." As we walked towards the clubhouse, our shoulders brushing, I realized two things. First, I'd completely forgotten about work and all its associated stress. And second, I was in serious danger of falling for this mysterious blonde golfer. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a story that would change my life forever. That first round of golf with Natalie became the start of something beautiful. Before I knew it, our weekly matches were the highlight of my existence. Every Wednesday afternoon, I'd find some excuse to slip out of the office early, my heart racing with anticipation as I drove to St. Paul Golf Club. Natalie was always there, waiting for me with that dazzling smile. We'd tee off as the sun began its descent, the golden light making her blonde hair shimmer like a halo. Our games were competitive, but it was the conversations between shots that I truly cherished. "So Lauren," she asked one day as we walked down the fairway, "what made you choose the cutthroat world of corporate finance?" I chuckled, lining up my next shot. Believe it or not, I wanted to make a difference. I thought if I could climb high enough, I could change things from the inside. Natalie's eyes softened. "And has it worked out that way?" I paused, considering my answer. "Not exactly. Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning in spreadsheets and politicking." I swung, watching my ball soar towards the green. "But then I come here, and suddenly everything makes sense again." She stepped closer, her hand brushing mine as she reached for her club. "I'm glad I can provide some clarity," she murmured, her voice sending shivers down my spine. Weeks turned into months, and I found myself falling harder for Natalie with each passing day. But I kept my feelings locked away, convinced that someone as incredible as her couldn't possibly be interested in me. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a typical company gala, all glitz and fake smiles. I was nursing a glass of champagne in the corner, counting the minutes until I could escape, when I heard a familiar laugh. I turned, and there she was. Natalie, looking absolutely stunning in a form-fitting black dress. Our eyes met across the crowded room, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. She started walking towards me, but before she could reach me, she was intercepted by none other than CEO Jonathan Wright. "Ah, Lauren," he boomed, guiding Natalie over. "I see you've noticed my daughter. Natalie, this is Lauren Torres, one of our rising stars." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Daughter? Natalie was the boss's daughter? How had I not known this? "Oh, we've met," Natalie said smoothly, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Lauren's quite the golfer." Mr. Wright looked surprised. "Is that so? Well, I'm glad to see you ladies getting along. Networking is crucial in this business after all." As he wandered off to schmooze with other guests, Natalie and I were left alone, an awkward silence stretching between us. "So," I finally managed, "the boss's daughter, huh?" She had the grace to look sheepish. "I should have told you sooner. I liked that you didn't know, that you were spending time with me because you wanted to, not because of who my father is." I could understand that, but it didn't stop the hurt from seeping in. "Were you ever going to tell me?" "Of course," she said, reaching for my hand. "Lauren, But whatever she was about to say was cut off by a clap of thunder. We both turned to see rain lashing against the windows. The storm had come out of nowhere, mirroring the turmoil in my heart. "Come on," Natalie said, tugging me towards the exit. "Let's get out of here." Before I could protest, we were running through the parking lot, the rain soaking us to the bone. Natalie led me to her car and we climbed in, breathless and dripping. For a moment, we just sat there, listening to the rain pounding on the roof. Then Natalie turned to me, her blue eyes intense in the dim light. "Lauren," she said softly, "I need you to know something. These past few months, our time together, it's meant everything to me. You've meant everything to me." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. "Natalie, But words failed me, so instead, I did the only thing that felt right in that moment. I leaned in and kissed her. It was like every cliché I'd ever read about: fireworks, electricity, the world fading away, until there was nothing but her lips on mine. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing heavily. "Wow," Natalie whispered, her forehead resting against mine. "Yeah," I agreed, unable to keep the smile off my face. As we sat there, rain drumming on the roof and our hearts beating in sync, I knew that everything was about to change. The rational part of my brain was screaming about the complications. She was my boss's daughter, for crying out loud. But looking into Natalie's eyes, seeing the same emotions I felt reflected back at me, I couldn't bring myself to care. Whatever storm was coming, we'd weather it together. And maybe, just maybe, we'd find our own little piece of paradise on the other side. The weeks following that rain-soaked kiss were a whirlwind of stolen moments and secret smiles. Natalie and I continued our golf games, but now they were charged with an electric undercurrent of desire. Every accidental brush of hands, every lingering glance across the green, sent shivers down my spine. We were careful, oh so careful, to keep our budding relationship under wraps. At work, we maintained a professional distance, though I caught myself staring at her more than once during board meetings. Natalie would catch my eye and give me a subtle wink, nearly causing me to choke on my coffee. It wasn't until the annual Wright Industries charity golf tournament that our secret finally came to light. Natalie and I had signed up as partners, confident in our ability to dominate the competition. What we hadn't counted on was the intensity of our connection being on full display for all to see. As we approached the 18th hole, we were neck and neck with the CFO and his wife. The tension was palpable, and I could feel the eyes of the entire company on us. Natalie stepped up to take her shot, and I couldn't help but admire the graceful line of her body as she swung. "Nice form, right?" I teased, my voice low enough for only her to hear. She turned, a mischievous glint in her eye. "You ain't seen nothing yet, Torres." Her ball soared through the air, landing perfectly on the green and rolling to within inches of the hole. The crowd erupted in cheers, and without thinking, I swept Natalie into a celebratory hug. As I held her, I became acutely aware of how perfectly she fit in my arms, how intoxicating her scent was. When we pulled apart, I saw a flash of something in her eyes, desire, love, and a hint of recklessness. Before I could react, she cupped my face in her hands and kissed me, right there in front of God and the entire Right Industries staff. Time seemed to stand still. The cheers faded to a dull roar in my ears, and all I could focus on was the softness of Natalie's lips, the warmth of her body pressed against mine. When we finally broke apart, reality came crashing back in the form of stunned silence followed by a wave of whispers. "Well," Natalie said, her cheeks flushed but her voice steady, "I guess the cat's out of the bag." I couldn't help but laugh, even as panic started to set in. "You think?" The rest of the day passed in a blur of congratulations, shocked looks, and not-so-subtle gossip. By the time we made it back to my apartment that evening, I was exhausted and more than a little worried about what Monday would bring. "Are you okay?" Natalie asked, curling up next to me on the couch. "I know that wasn't exactly how we planned to come out." I sighed, pulling her closer. "I'm just worried about work. Your father." "Can't do anything," she interrupted firmly. "We're both consenting adults and there's no company policy against dating. Besides, I'd quit before I let him come between us." Her words warmed my heart, but I couldn't shake the niggling doubt. "Are you sure about this, Nat? About us? It's not going to be easy." In response, she leaned in and kissed me softly. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Lauren. You're worth every challenge we might face." As our kisses deepened and clothes started to come off, I let myself believe in the possibility of our happily ever after. That night, we made love for the first time, our bodies moving together in perfect harmony. It was tender, passionate, and everything I'd ever dreamed of. The next few weeks were a roller coaster. True to Natalie's word, her father couldn't officially do anything about our relationship, but that didn't stop him from making his disapproval known. I found myself suddenly under intense scrutiny at work, every decision questioned, every report nitpicked. But for every moment of stress at the office, there were countless moments of joy with Natalie. Lazy Sunday mornings spent in bed, romantic dinners at hole-in-the-wall restaurants where no one knew us, and of course, our weekly golf games, which had taken on a whole new level of competitive flirtation. "If I win this hole," Natalie said one evening as we approached the 9th green, "you have to come to dinner at my parents' house next week." I groaned. "And, if I win?" She grinned wickedly. "Then I'll make it worth your while when we get home." Needless to say, I may have deliberately missed that putt. The dinner with Natalie's parents was as uncomfortable as I'd feared. Her mother was polite but distant, while her father barely concealed his disdain. But watching Natalie stand up to them, fiercely defending our relationship, made me fall even deeper in love with her. "I don't care what you think," she said, her voice trembling slightly but her gaze steady. "I love Lauren and she loves me. That's all that matters." As we left that night, I pulled Natalie close and kissed her under the stars. "I do, you know," I whispered against her lips. "Do what?" she asked, her eyes shining. "Love you." "I love you, Natalie Wright." Her answering smile was brighter than any sun. "I love you too, Lauren Torres." Walking back to the car, hand in hand, I felt invincible. Let the world throw whatever it wanted at us, whispers, disapproving glances, corporate politics. As long as I had Natalie by my side, I could face anything. Little did I know, the universe was about to put that theory to the test in the cruelest way possible. Life has a funny way of testing you, just when you think you've got it all figured out. Natalie and I had been riding high on our love for months, weathering the storm of office gossip and family disapproval with a united front. We thought we were invincible. We were wrong. It started with a business trip to Duluth. Right Industries was looking to acquire a small but promising tech startup, and I was tasked with leading the negotiations. Natalie, ever supportive, insisted on coming along. "I'll be your good luck charm," she said, packing her suitcase with a mischievous grin. "Besides, I hear Lake Superior is beautiful this time of year." The negotiations went smoothly, and we found ourselves with an extra day to explore the area. We rented a car and set out along the North Shore, marveling at the rugged beauty of the landscape. Natalie's hand was warm in mine as we drove, her laughter filling the car as she regaled me with stories from her rebellious college days. "I can't believe you streaked across campus," I chuckled, shaking my head. She shrugged, a glint in her eye. "What can I say? I've always been an exhibitionist at heart." As we rounded a bend, the road suddenly glistened with black ice. I felt the car begin to slide, and time seemed to slow down. I heard Natalie's sharp intake of breath, saw her eyes widen in fear. I tried to correct our course, but it was too late. The world spun, metal crunched, and everything went black. I woke to the steady beep of hospital monitors and the antiseptic smell of a recovery room. Every inch of my body ached, but that pain was nothing compared to the terror that gripped me when I realized Natalie wasn't by my side. "Natalie?" I croaked, my voice hoarse. "Where is Natalie?" A nurse appeared, her face a mask of professional concern. "Miss Torres, please try to stay calm. You've been in an accident." "I know that," I snapped, panic rising in my chest. "Where's Natalie? Is she okay?" The nurse hesitated, and in that moment, my world shattered. "Miss Wright is in intensive care. She sustained a severe head injury in the crash." The next few hours were a blur of tests, questions, and agonizing waiting. When they finally allowed me to see Natalie, I was unprepared for the sight that greeted me. She looked so small and fragile in the hospital bed, her beautiful face marred by cuts and bruises. I took her hand, careful of the IV lines, and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I'm here, Nat," I whispered. "I'm right here. Please, come back to me." Days passed in a haze of worry and guilt. I refused to leave Natalie's side, sleeping in the uncomfortable hospital chair, and subsisting on vending machine coffee. Her parents arrived, their faces drawn with concern. For once Mr. Wright didn't look at me with disdain, just a shared anguish that transcended our differences. It was a week before Natalie finally opened her eyes. I was dozing in the chair when I felt a slight pressure on my hand. I looked up to see her blue eyes, foggy with confusion but undeniably open. "Nat?" I breathed, hardly daring to believe it. "Oh, thank God. How do you feel?" She blinked slowly, her brow furrowing. When she spoke, her voice was raspy from disuse. Where am I?" "You're in the hospital, sweetheart. We were in an accident, but you're going to be okay." Natalie's eyes roamed the room, landing on her parents who had just entered. "Mom? Dad?" Her gaze then returned to me, and I felt my heart stop at the lack of recognition in her eyes. "Who are you?" The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Natalie, it's me, it's Lauren, don't you remember?" But it was clear from the blank look on her face that she didn't. The doctor later confirmed our worst fears. Natalie was suffering from retrograde amnesia. She remembered her parents, her childhood. But the last few years were a complete blank, including every moment we had shared together. I was devastated, but determined to help Natalie recover her memories. I spent hours recounting our story, showing her pictures, even bringing in our golf clubs in hopes of sparking some recognition. But each attempt was met with the same polite confusion, sometimes tinged with frustration. "I'm sorry," she would say, her eyes filled with genuine remorse. "I wish I could remember. You seem nice." Nice. The woman I loved, the woman who had kissed me in front of our entire company, now thought I was nice. It was almost more than I could bear. As Natalie's physical recovery progressed, her father began to exert more control over her care and her visitors. One afternoon as I arrived at the hospital with Natalie's favorite flowers, I was stopped by a security guard. "I'm sorry, Miss Torres," he said, not meeting my eyes. "I have orders from Mr. Wright. You're not allowed to see Miss Wright anymore." I was stunned. "What? That's ridiculous. I'm her girlfriend." "Not according to her current memory, you're not," came a cold voice behind me. I turned to see Jonathan Wright, his face set in grim lines. "Lauren, I think it's best if you step back. Natalie needs to focus on her recovery without any confusing influences." "Confusing influences?" I repeated, anger rising in my chest. "I love her, I can help her remember." His eyes softened slightly, but his resolve didn't waver. "And what if she doesn't want to remember? What if this is a fresh start for her?" "I'm sorry, Lauren, but I have to do what's best for my daughter. And right now, that means keeping you away from her." As he walked away, I felt my world crumbling around me. The love of my life didn't remember me, and now I was being forcibly kept from her side. I slumped against the wall, the flowers falling forgotten from my grasp. For the first time since the accident, I allowed myself to cry, great heaving sobs that shook my entire body. I had survived the crash only to lose everything that mattered. As I sat there on the cold hospital floor, I wondered how I could possibly go on without Natalie by my side. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of the fight for our love, a fight I was determined to win, no matter the cost. The weeks following Natalie's return to work were a special kind of hell. I'd watch her from afar, my heart aching with every glimpse of her blonde hair, or the sound of her laughter echoing down the hallway. She looked the same, moved the same, but the light of recognition in her eyes when she looked at me was gone. I tried to respect Mr. Wright's wishes, I really did. But how do you stay away from the person who is the center of your universe? So I watched, and I waited, hoping for any sign that Natalie was remembering our shared past. One particularly brutal Monday, I found myself hiding in the copy room, trying to compose myself after a meeting where Natalie had smiled politely and asked if we'd met before. As I was about to leave, I overheard two interns gossiping by the water cooler. "Did you hear? Natalie Wright is dating again," one said in a stage whisper. My blood ran cold as the other replied, "No way, who's the lucky guy?" "Some hotshot lawyer she met at her father's country club. Apparently they've been playing golf together every weekend." I stumbled back to my office, feeling like I'd been sucker punched. Golf? Our thing. The very foundation of our relationship. And now she was sharing it with someone else. That evening, driven by a masochistic impulse, I found myself at St. Paul Golf Club. I told myself I just wanted to play a few holes, clear my head, but deep down, I knew I was hoping to catch a glimpse of Natalie. As I approached the 18th hole, our hole, I saw them. Natalie was laughing, her head thrown back in that carefree way I loved, while a tall, handsome man stood close, his hand on the small of her back. My stomach churned as I watched him lean in to whisper something in her ear. Before I could stop myself, I was walking towards them. "Natalie?" I called out, my voice shaky. She turned, surprise flickering across her face. "Oh, hello, Lauren Wright, from the office?" I nodded, trying to ignore the stabbing pain in my chest. "Yeah, that's me. I didn't expect to see you here." "I'm just getting back into the swing of things," she said with a smile. "Oh, this is David. David, this is Lauren. She works at Wright Industries." David extended his hand, all charm and perfect teeth. "Nice to meet you, Lauren. Are you a golfer too?" "She is," Natalie answered before I could. "At least, I think I remember someone mentioning that you play." For a moment, hope flared in my chest. "That's right. In fact, you and I used to play here together quite often." Natalie's brow furrowed slightly. "We did? I'm sorry I don't." "It's okay," I said quickly, not wanting to see the confusion in her eyes. "It was a while ago." An awkward silence fell over us. David, clearly sensing the tension, suggested they finish their round. As they walked away, Natalie turned back. "It was nice seeing you, Lauren. Maybe we could play together sometime, help jog my memory?" I managed a weak smile. "Sure, that would be nice." But as I watched them disappear down the fairway, I knew it was a hollow promise. Natalie was building a new life, one that didn't include me. The next few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and distracted days. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects and staying late at the office. Anything to avoid going home to an empty apartment filled with memories of a life that no longer existed. I made a few half-hearted attempts to recreate our first meeting at the golf club, but each one fell flat. Natalie was unfailingly polite, but there was always a barrier between us. An invisible wall I couldn't breach. It was during one of these failed attempts that I ran into Mr. Wright. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and frustration. "Lauren?" he said, his voice low. "I thought I made myself clear. This isn't healthy for you or for Natalie." I stood my ground, chin raised defiantly. "With all due respect, sir, I'm not giving up on her, on us." He sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "And if she never remembers? If she chooses a different path, will you spend the rest of your life chasing a ghost?" His words hit home harder than I wanted to admit. Was that what I was doing? Chasing a ghost of the woman I loved? That night I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by photos of Natalie and me. Happy, in love, blissfully unaware of the cruel twist fate had in store for us. I picked up a picture from our first golf tournament together, tracing Natalie's smiling face with my finger. "I miss you," I whispered to the empty room. I miss us. As if in answer to my desperate plea, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number, but the message made my heart race. Is this Lauren? It's David, Natalie's friend. I think we need to talk. Can you meet me tomorrow? I stared at the screen, a mix of hope and dread swirling in my stomach. What could Natalie's new boyfriend possibly want to talk about? Was this the final nail in the coffin of our relationship? As I typed out a reply agreeing to meet, I couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would change everything. For better or worse, I was about to face a turning point in my quest to reclaim the love I'd lost. With a deep breath, I set the photo down and prepared myself for whatever the next day might bring. One way or another, I knew I was running out of time to find my way back to Natalie's heart. I spent the night tossing and turning, my mind racing with possibilities. By the time I met David at a small cafe the next morning, I was a jittery mess of nerves and sleep deprivation. Thanks for meeting me, David said, his expression serious. I know this must be awkward. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, I'm just going to cut to the chase. I think Natalie is starting to remember you. My heart leapt into my throat. What? How? It's little things, he explained. She'll say something or react to something, then look confused like she doesn't know where it came from. And... He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I found this in her golf bag. With trembling hands I opened the box. Inside was a beautiful silver necklace with a golf ball pendant. I recognized it immediately. It was the gift I'd given Natalie on our first anniversary. She doesn't know where it came from, David continued. But she won't let it out of her sight. Lauren, I care about Natalie, but I'm not going to stand in the way if there's a chance she's remembering her life with you. I felt tears pricking at my eyes. Thank you, I whispered. As I left the cafe clutching the necklace, I felt a renewed sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to bring Natalie back to me. Armed with this new information, I decided to take a risk. I gathered all the mementos of our relationship, photos, ticket stubs, the silly little gifts we'd exchanged, and packed them into a box. Then, taking a deep breath, I headed to Natalie's apartment. She looked surprised when she opened the door. Lauren, what are you doing here? I need to show you something, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Please, just give me a few minutes. She hesitated, then nodded, stepping aside to let me in. As I unpacked the box on her coffee table, I watched her face carefully. At first there was only polite curiosity, but as I explained each item I saw flickers of something. Recognition, confusion? I couldn't be sure. When I pulled out a photo of us kissing on the 18th green after winning the couples tournament, Natalie gasped softly. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide. I remember this, she whispered. How do I remember this? Hope surged through me. What do you remember, Nat? She closed her eyes, brow furrowed in concentration. The sun was setting. You were wearing that ridiculous lucky golf visor. We won, and I was so happy I kissed you. Right there in front of everyone. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. That's right. That's exactly how it happened. Natalie opened her eyes, looking at me with a mixture of wonder and fear. Lauren, what's happening to me? I think you're starting to remember, I said gently. Remember us. What followed was an emotional roller coaster of a day. We pored over photos and mementos, with Natalie occasionally exclaiming over a recovered memory. But for every memory that returned, there seemed to be a dozen still out of reach. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across Natalie's living room, she turned to me with tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I'm trying, I really am, but it's all so fuzzy. I remember feelings more than events. I remember loving you. But I don't remember being in love with you. Does that make any sense? I nodded, my heart aching. It does. And it's okay, Nat, we'll figure this out together. She gave me a watery smile, then glanced at the clock. Oh gosh, is that the time? I'm supposed to meet my father for dinner. He's been so protective since the accident. The mention of Mr. Wright sent a chill down my spine. Natalie, there's something you should know. Your father. He's been keeping me away from you. He thinks it's best if you don't remember our relationship. Natalie's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in anger. He what? How dare he? I'm a grown woman, I can make my own decisions. She stood up abruptly, grabbing her keys. Come on, we're going to have dinner with my father, and we're going to set a few things straight. The drive to the Wright family home was tense, with Natalie fuming silently beside me. As we pulled up to the imposing mansion, I felt a flutter of anxiety in my stomach. This confrontation could change everything. Mr. Wright's face when he opened the door and saw me standing beside Natalie was a study in barely contained rage. What is the meaning of this? He demanded. Natalie pushed past him, dragging me along. We need to talk, Dad, all of us. What followed was one of the most uncomfortable dinners of my life. Natalie, her memory still fragmented but her determination unwavering, confronted her father about his manipulation. Mrs. Wright sat silently, looking torn between supporting her husband and comforting her daughter. I may not remember everything, Natalie said firmly, but I know enough to know that what you did was wrong. You had no right to keep Lauren from me. Mr. Wright's face softened slightly. Sweetheart, I was just trying to protect you, to give you a chance at a fresh start. That wasn't your decision to make, Natalie replied. I need to figure this out for myself, and I need Lauren to be a part of that process. As we left that night, Natalie turned to me with a small smile. I still have a lot of questions, a lot of gaps to fill, but I know one thing for certain: I want you in my life, Lauren. I don't know exactly what that means yet, but I'd like to find out, if you're willing to be patient with me. I felt my heart swell with hope. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, not yet, but it was a start. A chance to rebuild what we'd lost, to fall in love all over again. As we drove back to the city, Natalie's hand found mine, our fingers intertwining, and for the first time in months I felt like I could breathe again. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them together, just like we always had. The weeks following our confrontation with Natalie's father were a delicate dance of rediscovery. We took things slow, retracing the steps of our relationship like explorers mapping uncharted territory. Each recovered memory was a treasure, carefully examined and cherished. One sunny Saturday, we found ourselves back at St. Paul Golf Club, the place where it all began. As we stood on the first tee, Natalie's hands trembled slightly as she gripped her driver. You okay? I asked, resisting the urge to reach out and steady her. She nodded, a determined set to her jaw. Yeah, just nervous, I guess. It feels important, being here with you. As we played, flashes of recognition lit up Natalie's face. On the fifth hole she suddenly laughed. I remember this sand trap. Didn't you get stuck here once and curse so loudly the groundskeeper came running? I grinned, warmth spreading through my chest. That I did. You never let me live it down. By the time we reached the 18th hole, Natalie was quieter, her brow furrowed in concentration. As she lined up her putt, I held my breath, remembering all the significant moments we'd shared on this very green. The ball rolled true, dropping into the cup with a satisfying plunk. Natalie turned to me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Lauren, she whispered. I remember. My heart skipped a beat. What do you remember, Nat? Everything, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Our first game, our first kiss, all the stolen moments and secret smiles. It's like a floodgate has opened. I couldn't hold back anymore. I pulled her into my arms, our lips meeting in a kiss that tasted of joy and relief and homecoming. When we finally parted, both of us were crying and laughing at the same time. Welcome back, I murmured, pressing my forehead to hers. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotion as Natalie's memories continued to solidify. We spent hours talking, filling in the gaps, laughing over shared jokes that finally made sense again. It wasn't all smooth sailing. There were moments of confusion, flashes of the pain and fear she'd experienced during her memory loss. But through it all, we clung to each other, stronger together than we'd ever been apart. A week after our breakthrough at the golf course, Natalie insisted on calling a meeting with the board of directors at Wright Industries. I tried to talk her out of it, worried about the potential fallout, but she was adamant. It's time we stop hiding, she said firmly. I'm tired of pretending to be someone I'm not. We deserve to be happy, Lauren, without constantly looking over our shoulders. So there we were, standing hand in hand before the entire board, including Natalie's still disapproving father. I could feel the weight of their stares, the mix of curiosity and judgment in their eyes. Natalie cleared her throat, her grip on my hand tightening. I called this meeting to address the elephant in the room, she began, her voice steady despite the slight tremor I could feel in her fingers. As many of you know, I recently recovered from a severe case of amnesia. What you may not know is that during that time, certain truths about my personal life were hidden from me. She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. I'm here today to set the record straight. Lauren Torres is not just my colleague. She is my partner, my love, and an essential part of my life. We've hidden our relationship for too long, fearing the impact it might have on this company, but I refuse to do that anymore. The room erupted in murmurs. I saw Mr. Wright's face turn an alarming shade of red, while other board members exchanged meaningful glances. If this is an issue for anyone, Natalie continued, her chin raised defiantly, I suggest you take a long, hard look at your priorities. Because I can assure you, Lauren and I are here to stay. Both in this relationship and in this company. There was a moment of tense silence before, to my utter shock, slow applause began. It started with a single board member, an older woman I recognized as a longtime friend of Natalie's mother, and gradually spread across the room. Mr. Wright remained stone-faced, but even he seemed to realize he was fighting a losing battle. As the meeting adjourned, he approached us, his expression unreadable. Natalie, he said, his voice gruff. I may not understand this, but you're my daughter. If this is truly what you want to, I'll try to accept it. It wasn't a ringing endorsement, but coming from Jonathan Wright, it was practically a blessing. Natalie's eyes filled with tears as she hugged her father, whispering a quiet thank you in his ear. As we left the boardroom, hand in hand and heads held high, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time since Natalie's accident, I allowed myself to believe that we might actually get our happily ever after. That night, as we lay tangled together in bed, Natalie traced lazy patterns on my skin. You know, she murmured, I've been thinking, maybe it's time we organize that LGBTQ-friendly golf tournament we always talked about. I chuckled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Yeah? You think the club is ready for that? She grinned, a mischievous glint in her eye. Oh, I think we can make them ready. After all, we make a pretty formidable team. As I drifted off to sleep, Natalie's warmth beside me and plans for the future swirling in my mind, I felt truly at peace. We'd weathered the storm, faced down our demons, and come out stronger on the other side. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, I knew we'd face them together, one swing at a time. A year can change everything. As I stood on the first tee of St. Paul Golf Club, watching a sea of rainbow flags flutter in the breeze, I marveled at how far we'd come. Our LGBTQ-friendly golf tournament had evolved from a pipe dream into a reality, drawing participants from across the country. Natalie appeared at my side, resplendent in a tailored white suit, her blonde hair gleaming in the summer sun. Ready to kick this off, babe? I grinned, stealing a quick kiss. Born ready? As we made our opening speeches, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought us here. The accident, the amnesia, the struggle to reconnect, it all seemed like a lifetime ago. Yet those challenges had only made us stronger, more determined to live our truth and make a difference. The tournament was a roaring success. Laughter and cheers echoed across the greens as couples of all genders competed, free from judgment or discrimination. Even Mr. Wright made an appearance, his initial discomfort gradually replaced by grudging admiration as he witnessed the joy and camaraderie on display. As the day wore on, I found myself growing increasingly nervous. My hand kept straying to the small velvet box hidden in my pocket, my heart racing every time Natalie glanced my way. I'd been planning this moment for months, but now that it was here, I felt like a rookie facing their first pro tournament. We reached the 18th hole just as the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of pink and gold. This was it, our hole. The place where our story had begun, ended, and begun again. Hey Nat, I called out, my voice only slightly shaky. How about a little wager on this last hole? She raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Oh, what did you have in mind? I took a deep breath. If I sink this putt, you have to answer a question for me. No holds barred. Natalie laughed, her blue eyes sparkling with mischief. And, if you miss? Then. I pretended to think hard. I'll do the dishes for a month. Make it 2 months and you've got a deal, she countered. I nodded, trying to hide my grin. Little did she know, I'd been practicing this exact putt for weeks. As I lined up my shot, the world seemed to fall away. There was only the ball, the green, and the woman I loved watching from the sidelines. I drew back my putter and sent the ball rolling smoothly across the grass. Time seemed to slow as it neared the hole, curving slightly before dropping in with a satisfying plunk. Natalie cheered, rushing over to congratulate me. Nice shot, hot shot. So, what's this burning question you've got for me? This was it. No turning back now. I took her hands in mine, my heart pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. Natalie Wright, I began, my voice thick with emotion. You are the love of my life. We've been through hell and back together, and I can't imagine facing another day without you by my side. Her eyes widened as realization dawned. I dropped to one knee, pulling out the velvet box and opening it to reveal a stunning diamond ring. Will you marry me? For a moment, the world stood still. Then Natalie's face broke into the most beautiful smile I'd ever seen. Yes, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Yes, 1,000 times yes. As I slipped the ring onto her finger, cheers erupted around us. I looked up to see that a crowd had gathered, tournament participants, club members, even some of the Wright Industries board members. And there, at the front of the crowd, stood Mr. and Mrs. Wright, both with tears in their eyes. Mr. Wright stepped forward, clearing his throat awkwardly. Lauren, I owe you an apology. I was wrong about you, about your relationship with my daughter. I can see now how much you love each other. And, well, I'd be honored to call you my daughter-in-law. I felt my own eyes well up as I shook his hand. Thank you, sir. That means more than you know. As the impromptu engagement party kicked off around us, Natalie pulled me close. So, future Mrs. Wright Torres, how does it feel to have just won the grand slam of life? I laughed, pressing my forehead to hers. Like, I've finally found my hole-in-one. We sealed our engagement with a kiss, the cheers of our friends and family fading into the background. In that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges life might throw our way, we'd face them together, with love as our trusty caddy. As the stars began to twinkle overhead, Natalie and I snuck away from the celebration, hand in hand. We made our way to the top of a small hill overlooking the course, the place where we'd shared our first kiss all those years ago. You know, Natalie mused, her head resting on my shoulder, I never really believed in fairy tales, but this, us, it's better than any story I could have imagined. I smiled, pulling her closer. It's not a fairy tale, Nat, it's real. It's messy and complicated and sometimes it hurts like hell, but it's ours. She lifted her head, her eyes meeting mine with an intensity that took my breath away. Promise me something, Lauren. Anything. I replied without hesitation. Promise me we'll never stop fighting for this, for us, no matter what life throws our way. I sealed my promise with a kiss, pouring every ounce of love and devotion I felt into it. As we stood there silhouetted against the starry sky, I knew that this was just the beginning of our greatest adventure yet, and I couldn't wait to see where the next hole would take us.